Okay. Quiet down. We got one more to go here. One more to go.
Get out of here.
Prismacolor, yeah. Everybody take out another sheet of paper or your pad, small pad again. We're going to go back to Prismacolor. Prismacolor back on this one. We're not going to emphasize the tools until the end of this. The triangle with the Prismacolor is a really nice thing to come back with and clean this next drawing up, kind of like we did with Apple. So the original Macintosh. So I'm gonna want to build this with freehand sketch, get all my proportions right, and probably use the triangle right at the end just to clean up some lines, because I've got a lot of really long lines on this, long straight lines. So yeah, if you've had trouble with convergence, if you've had trouble getting multiple lines converging, this one's gonna push you a little bit. This is what this one's about. And I was just telling Jared, this actually would be a really good exploded view to do as well, because it would be working more in the horizontal. So you'd be blowing out and exploding mostly in the horizontal dimension, which is the opposite of what the minifigure is. So that would be kind of cool to try. Something to think about next year. I might get another one of these and pull it apart, and we could do something. It'd be kind of fun. But today we're just going to draw it as is. Let's look at it. Let's spend time analyzing the look of it here. And you can see the best view, actually the best view is right here. This side view gives you the most information, gives you a sense of the proportions of the length of it. But let's look all the way around it here if you can up front. I'll try to rotate it a little bit. This is from the late 30s. It was very popular. These were very common in the United States. It was designed by a guy named Laurel Gill. And it's actually a fantastic example of what we call streamline moderne, which was kind of a movement, mainly in the United States, of styling. And the idea was you make something look like it's in motion even when it's sitting still. So, you know, Greyhound buses, locomotives, it was kind of a new era, and this vacuum cleaner was styled in that manner, using a lot of chrome, some polished aluminum next to the chrome. It has this kind of leatherette that's glued to a metal housing underneath. This thing weighs quite a bit. It's all metal. There's not much plastic in this, and vinyl handle there. And so let's look at it. The front part of it has a hemispherical nature to it. It's not a true sphere, but it's close. It's very, very rounded and sculpted right here. Not a bullet nose, not a true sphere, but a round to it. As you kind of work around it, you'll notice the prominent feature are these side flutes, these longitudinals, all done purely for styling. There's no function here whatsoever. It's 100% stamped steel, chrome, just to look at, just to make it cool, which it is cool. Do what? Beautiful, isn't it? This, you know what? So beautiful that I have this. This is one of my weird claims to fame. My wife is one of the most patient and tolerant women that I know. She lets me bring home junk like this, and believe it or not, this right here, this default position is on the Tillman mantle over the fireplace. Can you believe that my wife lets me do this? This sits on our mantle. It's this big conversation piece, and everybody comes in our house and says, "What is that? And why is that on your mantle?" Total geekness, right? So anyway, here's what it's doing. We got to get the proportions right of these flutes. Mainly, we got to get the proportions right of the length, okay? Length versus the kind of tube shape. And the back is actually built more off of cylinders. You can kind of see this stepped kind of jet engine kind of look to this. And then you've got these skids, these the sleds, essentially. It doesn't have wheels. It pulls, you were to pull this around on your carpet or your floor. So the trick of this, in years past, the things that students get the most tripped up on are the general proportions, getting the length to the diameter right, The particular transitions that we have here on the front, getting this fluting actually kind of turns more or less a right-hand turn on a radius, but that's a slightly different, and this is leaned back. This is all at an angle, so let me show you this. The section by which this whole front is built around is an angled section. So it's cut. It's not vertical, it's cut at an angle. Can y'all all see that? Shows up pretty clearly there in the side view. So this is all kind of part of understanding the geometry of what this thing is doing. I'm going to actually leave it more or less in the side view because, again, I feel like this is the most informative for most of what we're doing. And we're gonna draw this. Let's draw this from a front view. That's the front right 3/4 view this time instead of the rear. We were doing a lot of these from the rear. And real quickly, one of the things that's happening here is this product is floating. Because of these sleds, it actually is floating off the ground. And so we're going to draw kind of where the ground is, but we have to draw some space here too. And this shape is a little bit elevated. So real quickly, let's just look and see, should I draw this? Since this main body is here, I tell you what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to focus on the main body first, and I'm going to put the sleds on at the end. So if I put the sleds on at the end, I think I am going to draw my ground at the end. This is not normal. I typically would draw my ground plane first, but I think I'm going to draw the tube and get all that working and then grow the sleds down and kind of build a ground plane at the end. I think that's going to be a little easier. So real quickly, if I was to kind of subdivide this, let's get a sense of what the proportions are. And I'm gonna start by creating kind of a square, a front leading edge there, and I'm gonna actually finish it not where the ends of those tubes are, but let's finish it right about there. Those extra tubes are not gonna show up much at the back from the viewpoint that we have. And if I was to actually just start dividing squares here, I'm just going to take that height and kind of find where a square would be. That's just going to be square 1, square 2, and a little bit more than square 3. You can see that square 3 would finish out, it's probably like 2.5, maybe not even quite 2.5. So square 3 is probably right there, plus a little bit more. It's almost like 3 squares to right there, to where that chrome starts, almost. So that gives me a sense of kind of distance in that dimension. The front view, to get a view of kind of this cross section, this is really important here, folks. Understand what this cross section is doing.
Can you zoom out this tab?
Oh, sorry. Yep.
You can zoom out.
Oh, zoom out. We'll go out. How about right there?
Perfect, thank you.
So I've got essentially what is a circle. If I was to take tangency right there and tangency right here and here, I could probably say that's pretty close to a cylinder right there, and probably pretty close to a cylinder all the way to right here. So really, kind of to this midpoint, it's close to a square. Now, here's what's important. Where is that midpoint? It's not the midpoint of that, is it? It's a little higher than that. In fact, it's almost at the top tangency of this. So this is important to think about as we sketch this out. And then below this, it really isn't a square. It really isn't a circle anymore. It kind of is slightly arced, slightly arced, slightly arced. 3 arcs with a radius kind of on this corner and that corner. And this is important to remember too, that it's not a pure cylinder all the way through, but it actually has kind of a flat with rounds on the bottom, and that this is set lower. How much lower? I don't know that y'all can even see that. Oh yeah, it shows up better on screen than it does here. So there's a center line there. And then we look at kind of the height of these flutes. It's pretty close to being, it's slightly above, but it's pretty close to being midpoint of the center of the tube, of the cylinder. Does that all make sense? You got to kind of see that first, because we want to draw this cross section on a front face and extrude it. And before we do the angled slice and before we do the the hemispherical shape and all of that. We want to get this right, okay? So I'm going to try to do that. And I'm going to start out kind of like I typically do. I'm going to try to use as much of this paper as I can. And again, I typically do this drawing on a larger piece of paper. This is, or on the whiteboard. So it's really kind of hurting me here. I want more space than I've got. But I'm going to go with it here. And I'm going to leave a little bit of room beneath, remember, because I'm going to have to put my sleds on at the end. So, you know, don't go all the way to the bottom. Give yourself kind of a starting point. I'm gonna bias to this side so that I've got enough room to do kind of my I'm gonna pull this forward just a little bit, somewhere maybe right in there. And I'm gonna move this perspective line off that direction. So this is my front corner. And this is this tube will end up being something like this. So I'm gonna kind of have to estimate a height here, but again, I'm estimating height based on fitting my page. So it's like I start a perspective to fit it on my page. I'm estimating this first height of the vacuum based on, hey, can I fit it on my page? And then I'll go with proportions from there. So let's do that. And then I've got a pretty long convergence moving on back here. If I can hit it. There we go. Third line's a charm. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and box in, make this first kind of proportional box here that will be my starting point for my cylinder. I'm going to carry that back to that convergence. And I had how many boxes? I had 1, 2, 3 and 3 1/3 almost. It's about 3 1/3 boxes back to the right side. So here's one. I could do diagonal measuring if that helps. Do a quick diagonal measuring, but I'm actually just trying to foreshorten these kind of based on what I think should happen. That's pretty close. I might have actually shortchanged the first cube a little bit. That probably should have been a little wider, but. And then I'm going to add another third. Don't forget that other third. I'll actually reclaim a little of that width back here just to get it. So this ends up being kind of the proportions of my tube. If I got that right, let's see. 1, 2, 3 1/3. Now, if y'all see me making a big blunder on proportions, just tell me like you did the other day, because I was like getting into it, and you're saying, "Hey, Shay, you missed a line." That happens. So I'm going to bring this back over, and that's converging back to the point that I really can't see, but is these two lines are working that direction. I'm going to drop down from that, and it is important. Hey, everybody in here better be drawing your whole box. Draw the back side of this. It's very, very important to get your profiles in proper perspective. Don't just draw the front, draw the back. And so that's what I'm doing here. Draw the whole box. Really important, actually. Because the next biggest mistake people make is when they're drawing these rear ellipses, they squat them out and they make them totally the wrong angle. And notice how wide this square looks compared to this one, even though I know them to be the same size in actuality. They're completely different in perspective. All right, that gets me started. You know, in terms of the way that you proceed on this, other than the sleds, this is pretty orthodox. I'm going to start from the front. I'm going to work down the length. I'm going to try first to create very lightly, my kind of a proportion of what's going on here for that front shape. Now, let's look at top view here too. I didn't really do this, but just remembering that fluting actually steps out a little bit left and right, and there is a handle that's pretty close to centered, starts pretty close to centered and works back. Gosh, I could start that profile right there, or I could go on and draw an angled plane. This is a tough call. I guess to get it right, let's start it on the flat surface because I think we need to know what we're doing. So I'm gonna go to midline here. I'm gonna draw me a little line through there just to make sure I'm close. Draw me another line. If you need to use diagonals to do that, go right ahead. And I could draw one huge ellipse. Minor axis, go into that right-hand vanishing point. There you go. Now again, this line will not show up on my product, so you want to make this really light. This is really just giving me a sense of perspective. And since I'm doing that line, I might as well go ahead and make it happen back here at the rear too. Go on and draw midpoint on that rear. This one's going to be very circular, almost is a circle. There you go. Look at how much more open this ellipse is than that one. I was just upstairs grading your glasses. Your glasses, by the way, are much better in general than the original cylinders that Jared graded. So you're going to have really ridiculously bad grades probably on the cylinders, and you're going to have a little bit better grades on the glasses, because I think a lot of you over that weekend started to kind of get the ellipses and how these open up. So this is important to kind of get this right. Okay, everybody got that? Because a lot of people miss that right there. They only draw this first quarter. Technically, all I'm going to end up seeing of this rear ellipse is that quarter. But honestly, if you don't draw the whole thing, you'll get that quarter wrong every time. So draw the whole thing, get this minor axis working, and make sure you're on the right track. That's another big fallacy with this drawing. People seem to screw that up. All right, so I've got a good feel now. It's like I've got the length, I've got the width, I've got the height, I've even got the top half of my cylinder started. Now I'm going to get into a little bit trickier moment, and that is going to be leaning this back. I'm going to keep working on the front here. Lean this back at a cut at an angle. So the easy way to look at that angle first is to do it right here on this side plane. It's pretty significant. Look, that angle almost comes, if I'm looking at where the part split is, which is the easiest line to look at how far back that comes on that first, almost to halfway, not quite, but almost to halfway through that first square. So if this is halfway through that square, that cut's probably going to finish right in there. And so I'm going to go ahead and draw that lightly. Again, this is not on my product yet. This is just to give me a sense of where that cut is going to fall. That line, keep it light, just like this, just like this. Now I'm going to move over, and what I want to do is translate that as a plane. I want to go ahead and draw that, and I'm going to extend that line where that angle starts over to the opposite width of this. I'm going to drop it down to that corner. This is real easy geometry to follow right now because it's just kind of cutting through that. Everybody see that, what I did? I estimated back almost to but not quite halfway on that square. I stepped down to this corner, I stepped down to that corner, and now I have a plane. Actually, I have a plane that represents that cut, that I can now begin to retranslate my ellipse and my intersections and things to. So you should have something that's cut back kind of like that. So far, so good. I'm feeling still okay about it. We'll see where this goes. Now, this is where it gets a little bit trickier because I need to retranslate this cylinder to that plane. And when I do that, of course, the top point is pretty easy, and I know it's going to land at wherever these drop back. It's gonna finish right here and right here. But I don't really know, and maybe I'll just draw that so that becomes my new center point, where that comes through. Didn't draw that very well. That's where my center point is, but I've got to kind of wing this a little bit. In fact, it's an ellipse again, but it's an ellipse with the minor axis actually tilted downward. And in this case, there is no vanishing convergence for me to really look at. So this is kind of where you got to wing it a little bit. but I've got my tangencies. I know it's got to hit these 3 points. I know the center point is right there. Do I draw the whole thing? I'll try. Part of me actually just wants to draw it on this and not try to draw the whole cylinder, but I'll try to draw the whole cylinder with that minor axis heading down. At least that gives me a start. Now I'm going to come back and kind of, now that I've drawn that whole ellipse, I'm going to come back and kind of darken in the part that I think is most accurate to hitting my tangencies and making that work. Ah, it's pretty close. And that line, my friends, is on your product. It's the first one up front here that's actually gonna show up. Do you see the one I hit just a little darker? The back side will get hidden, but I'm gonna draw it a little darker here for you to see it. That becomes that ellipse pretty close. I might have missed a little bit in here. It might be a little bit more rounded, but close enough that I think it's gonna work. Now, this is where it gets fun. Because I have that intersection represents this cut line, essentially right here, the top portion of it. I might go ahead and actually try to draw on the bottom what that section is doing down here too. While I'm doing so good up top, I'm going to continue that and get that section drawn on that plane in the bottom. So notice what it's doing. Again, it's dropping down. It's coming down to, I'm going to see if it actually does, and I will just kind of measure this and make sure. Let's see if it's fairly close to half and half, yeah. So it does come down and more or less touch this bottom. I'm gonna freehand this, and the way I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna come to the bottom first and try to kind of do that arc. Remember how we kind of did this the other day with the, what was it? We flipped it upside down. Oh, it was the washer and dryer. We kind of did that reverse arc underneath. I'm using the center line, the center point, and I'm not, remember, this arc doesn't actually come to a flat. It never becomes flat. But there's another arc that rolls around here. In fact, I might have made it a little bit too flat, but I'm going to stick with it. This arc drops down and intersects. And this is going to get rounded off, but I'm not going to do that yet. Wait before you put your radiuses on. Boy, that's looking exactly like I want it to. This might be a winner here. And then I'm gonna say, well, that point is right in there, and I'm gonna do the same thing again. I'm using arcs, and go on and cross it if you need to. Now I have my profile drawn on that angled plane. The whole profile that gets extruded, I'm gonna go ahead and put a round on it because that is what's on there. Is a fairly large radius that gets hit right there, and a fairly large radius right here. It's going to look a little more elongated than it looks in this orthographic photograph because it's on a plane. And I didn't get this quite smooth over here, so I'm going to blend that out a little more. Make sure this comes up to tangency here. All right. Now, literally, if I took the nose cone off of this, I've just drawn, minus the two side flutes, I've essentially just drawn that shape, right? And I'll have to come back and fill in forward to get all of this. But I should have this much drawn right here, more or less. Okay. I'm going to go ahead, before I get on to the forward part here, I'm going to go ahead and draw. I need an easy win. I've got all the pieces here to start to put in my extruded shape. Except, actually, as I'm looking, not the rear profile here. So let's do that real quick. I'm going to drop that down the same way. Roll this around. I didn't do that one very well. Let's try again there. And right here, that drops And then these get radiused back as well. And over the top. So it's all, in this case, it's an extruded section. It's not a section view like what we had on the Eames chair or the teapot. It's an extruded section. It should be a little easier to visualize. At least it is for me. And I didn't bring that corner down far enough. I'm gonna drop that down a little more. Again, correct as you go. I can see that corner needs to be right in there. And then I'm gonna connect the dots. I know that where those two meet tangency is my vacuum. And that line, my friends, is on your vacuum in a big way. Big way. It'll become heavier later. We'll hit that harder in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and hit tangency to tangency right here too. So the top. I need an easy win. Let's connect some dots. The quicker you can get an easy win and start to see where this works, the better. All good? Okay, where are we at? Okay, we're at 25 after. I'll keep going here. Okay. Next up, going to come forward. I'm going to go ahead and draw. I'm going to start actually on this corner. I'm kind of going to build out. Let's see if I can get the side view going here again. I'm going to build out this corner, growing it forward and kind of building this radius. This is a heavily radiused corner. That fluting really has a, gosh, that must be like almost a 2-inch radius on the outside corner of that. So it rolls pretty fast. But I do know that the tip of this, in fact, I know that the ellipse for the hole, for the input, is actually low. I could actually draw that. I actually have the plane to draw that. I might just do that. That's another easy win. So I know that this ellipse is actually on a plane. It's not really leaned back so much. That lean back really starts where the center point is and drops the rest of the way. So let's do that. Make sure you get the proportions right. Not too big, not too small on this. I'm going to roll this up a little higher, and it comes almost to midpoint. Make sure your minor axis is going to the right side. That's pretty close. I'll come back and darken it later. That minor axis is heading this direction. That helps me. Once I see that, it helps me. That's why I'm putting and I'm trying to draw it in the order that helps me see to make the next step, you know. So actually having that ellipse there on that front plane, knowing that's more or less flat from there down, that helps me out. I can kind of see where I now need to run these flutes. So I'm going to start actually on this front face, and these flutes are more or less flat. They start out more or less flat. They lean a little bit actually right there. I can see that just a little, but it's going to be so minor. It's the hemispherical face that really steps up. So I'm going to just sketch. There's a little boundary on each side. They pretty much start outside right here and right here are those two lines. And they kind of start just below the top of this. I'm actually getting them started maybe right in here. So there's a line cutting through here. That's the kind of the corner of that fluting. That gets me started there. How tall are they? Well, they're actually close to the height of that ellipse, maybe just a little less. So I'm going to bring them up somewhere in here. Now I'm going to have to, I may correct this when I wrap around, I'm not sure, but I'm going to draw these flutes actually before I draw the hemisphere. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I haven't done it this way before. I usually draw the hemisphere first, but I'm kind of feeling like the flutes are on that plane and I probably need to go with that first. So if they're more or less flat and we'll just say they are for the sake of argument here. Let's go on and kind of draw that boundary in its flatness out here. Now notice what happens. The corner is going to kick out much further because this is leaned back, right? That would make sense. If you brought that corner all the way out to the end, it's going to be way too long because we're going to have a radius on there. But technically, it's just a huge radius put on the corner of this bounding box. But it's a really big radius, not a little one. And in fact, the radius pretty much starts almost from the point of, if I look at the top of this, this is maybe not the best view. Can you see this? If I'm looking at the top of this, the boundary of where that hemisphere is, this radius here is what I'm about to draw. And it almost starts as a radius the moment it comes off of that face. So, and then it blends to tangency right there. So really, pretty much from right here around all the way to where that intersection is going to be a radius.
There you go.
And it's going to happen that way on the other side too, except it kicks more out here. You would see it roll around much more like this. I might have made it go a little bit far, but it's something like that. Does that make sense so far? And I can extend the same thing here on the bottom. Make it roll and come to tangency on the bottom. Go ahead and make it roll a little bit back here. Now on this one, because it's so pronounced on this back side, my tendency is to actually want to lean it a little bit because technically it is leaned back, but I'm going to draw it vertically first, and then if we need to lean it back, we can. But it's doing the same thing. It's rolling around to draw that back side of it's rolling around the back side. So there you go. Now I've still got to get to my hemisphere and where that's coming in. And we'll see. Maybe it's possible I've messed something up here on this radius. I've got a question mark in my head, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to go ahead and get to where this center line is here, cut across, and I know that there's a center line up here that I had marked when I first drew that ellipse. That is the center line of this sketch. Really, really important, because that center line is going to also be the center line for this handle as we work backward. So I'm just going to take and draw my best shot as kind of a falling back ellipse. It's got to come to tangency more or less right up there at the top, so it's got to turn kind of hard, but something like that. It gives me kind of a contour line. Actually, it ends up being kind of this removal handle too, but I hadn't gotten to thinking about that yet. I'm really just trying to figure out what this shape is doing in 3D space. Because I want to get the inside intersection of that radius. And I'm sitting here wondering if I've even made this a little bit too hard of a turn in some ways. I may pull out of that a little bit. And roll this around. Remember, this particular shape right here is not my outer boundary. It leans back a little bit. I'm trying to see, it falls away. If I look at this top view here, see how that hemisphere is falling and that's falling? So I've drawn that, but I haven't yet drawn this. This falls harder and faster back to this corner. So if I've got to get back to right there from there, and this is rolling, then there's another rolling edge that's somewhere right in here. And it's doing something very similar, but it's less pronounced than what we did out here with the ribbing, with the fluting, I should say. And the same thing is going to happen here. I actually think that's why I was actually feeling like I might have made this one. It's almost like this one becomes the interior, and the one that I may have messed up right there and made that a little bit too broad. So I'm going to actually bring forward the one that I did first, and I'm going to make that back one the hemisphere. It shows up better. It's actually a little easier to see this, I think, on the left-hand side, something like that. Now, where that tangency meets up top here, I need to reconnect that because that actually becomes the roundness of that hemisphere. You can't get confused with that original section that we did. You remember that that's a sectioned view, and remember that you can extend this on down. This actually is fluid too. This actually gets bulbous and drops down beneath there as well, and has a thickness that I'm not really putting in terribly well there, but so far so good. This shaded, I'll shade the top of that just to kind of again show that. I'll come back, I'll add flutes later, don't worry about that. The main thing is to get the strip working right so that you can get it headed down the long length here, which is my next thing. Now, at this point, because I've spent all this time getting my proportions right on these, where these flutes are, this is a good time to invest in a triangle. I've got all of my convergence working. I'm not having to think much with my triangle, but I know I want a really good straight line running down kind of this path. And why not use, at this point, a straight edge? You can preview your line real well. I can see, I want to get that convergence working just so. I'm going to use it here. I'm going to start with that front corner, and I'm going to send it down. I'm going to let it extend a little beyond, because remember, this is proud. This is stepping out beyond the width of that. And then I know I got that little offset line, too, that's also going to converge way out there, and I want it to look right. I might actually draw it from the top where I can see that convergence a little better. I want it to look right too, so I'm going to kick it out and send it down that line. And in that particular case, I use the straight edge because, hey, I want those spot on, they're close, and I feel like I had a good starting point guide to get me there. If you want to, you can even kick that out there because, again, this is going to stand proud on that rear corner. And I can do the same at the bottom. This stands a little proud. Get your convergence previewed just right through the triangle there. Don't rely on your freehand on that particular line. I'm gonna send that one back with the straight edge. Put the proud step out right there, and there you go. I got the flutes more or less on the side. Does that look about right? Where's my side view? Side view is still the best one to kind of look at here. It's pretty close. Might be, oh, you know what? I actually sent that too far because this steel comes back from that. So I'll have to trim that back in just a second. But I can do that. Okay, how are we? All right, we got to pick up the pace. Real quickly, because I want to cut this steel back, let's do that first. I know that it's going to come back the full third of that partial and probably almost another third on that original subdivision that I had. So I'm going to come all the way back to, say, right in here. Right in here is actually where the next circle will be. I'm gonna go on and just wing that, but it's going to follow very close to what that ellipse was. And this becomes really the step back for the metal edge, the rear cap, whatever you want to call it. And then I'm going to come back and slightly darken that part of it that might have made it a little thick. And roll that underneath. This actually starts to roll, but it rolls at a different rate, right? Kind of comes in, rolls underneath like that. So this, instead of going all the way back like I drew it, comes right here. Now, again, I was running about 50% value on the pencil when I did that. That's going to be a hard mistake to hide, but I know I still got another 50% of value I can hit darker here in a minute, and it may help with that a little bit. Hopefully it will. Okay, next up, do not miss this. This is an easy one to miss. I'm going to use my straight edge one more time this direction to draw that center line very lightly, but that center line running down the length of this. I didn't quite hit it. Try again. That center line, not the tangency, but the center line is where this handle goes. You know what? At least half the people that draw this get this wrong. They don't put this handle dead center on this cylinder. They clock it over to tangency or something. But this handle, look at it's streamlined too. It has this kind of prismatic, rounded prismatic shape. It starts about halfway down. It's actually, it is almost halfway through the middle square. I'm just going to create kind of a starting point for it. But it actually, that starting point for that handle follows the contour. It's not flat. It follows the contour of this cylinder that this is on. So I'm going to start freehanding again. I got enough done with the straight edges to kind of get me going. I'm going to go ahead and start mocking up what this looks like. And then it rolls, the other side is the same way. It rolls across. This goes to the left vanishing point. Rolls underneath. Don't make the mistake of putting it out on that tangent edge. It clocks the thing the wrong way. So I get the handle here. There's also the equivalent block of that handle is back here on the steel itself. So I'll go ahead and kind of draw it in. It goes all the way to the back, steps up, same height. It's a little blockier, a little easier to draw. And once I have those two blocks kind of put in, then and only then, I will put the kind of arced handle in there that's the vinyl handle. And I'll do the top arcs first. Missed that one. I clocked that one. That one needs to blend down. And a thickness here. Okay. What next? Well, I don't have any detailing done on this. It's kind of bugging me, but I still know I have to put sleds on it. I got to put the Electrolux window. Got to put a few hints of flutes here. The flutes are kind of an important part of this drawing and this design. Let's go with the sleds first because that represents really the last big architectural piece of this. You'll notice they start. It's actually kind of out on a flying bolt here to the right side. I don't have to get all of that right, but I'm going to just bring this forward. Let's look at the front view real quickly. See how it's kind of stepped out, and it almost is even with the outside boundary of that fluting if I look at it this way. But I'm going to step out, kind of come across, say, well, where's my front view? I keep missing that. That's probably right in here, and it comes out almost to that corner. It's actually really close to, really does not protrude past this, and kind of starts right in here. So really, it's kind of like doing this, and it rolls, and then it kicks back like a sled. And it's technically just barely under there. I'm kind of fudging it a little bit here because I need a little more width than I have, but it's doing this. Getting that front edge. The opposite sled is just barely going to show. It really isn't that noticeable, but you might see it just a little bit because it steps out just beyond. And that's an important part of drawings like this, is even when something's almost invisible, don't make it invisible. Make it kind of out there. And it kind of, again, it reinforces what this one is. You don't actually always have to get it perfect, but it reinforces what's going on over on this side. It kind of says, oh, okay, that makes sense. So once I get that sled started, I know that sled comes all the way back to this level, not all the way back to here. Well, the bottom comes all the way back to the back of this. Let's go ahead and I'm going to use the straight edge here. This is a longitudinal line. I want to get it right, so let's get it right. Let's go the distance, get the convergence right. We'll send it all the way back. It's going to be out a little proud, not much, but essentially doing something like that. I'm going to go ahead and put a little round there, kind of fudge the material thickness. There's actually several kind of thicknesses here going on. Sometimes easier to see from the top again. And again, even these little lines converge. Even these small lines are getting thinner as they work back. So it does help. Technically, there's a material thickness I would see here, which I'm going to really just kind of fudge on the first part of that so that it looks that way. We'll go ahead and hit this hard. Let's drop the heavy one on that one. Get this starting to look, have a thickness to it. Give it that. Make it look like it needs to look. Okay, and then back here it does the same thing. It curls forward. Curls forward. Actually almost all the way back to right here where it steps out. And again, this is almost hiding back there. You don't really see the whole thing, but it's right here. Right here. That's what you're drawing.
Move it over just a tad too, right?
Right here?
No.
Yeah, I want you drawing this. This is, you can't see this?
We can see that.
Yeah, that's what I want you looking at right now. I don't want you copying my drawing. There's a big difference between copying Shay's drawing and drawing this Electrolux in perspective. I'm setting up a perspective system for you to kind of get an angle. But really, you ought to be looking right here. You ought to be looking at your drawing, what your drawing is doing, and that shape. And not necessarily what I did. And the reason is I just screwed it all up. Y'all are all going to copy my screw up if you did it. I got my shape wrong. That's the correct shape. Calibrate to correctness. Don't calibrate to Shay. Shay's always correcting what he's seen, trying to correct it, get it all right. That's what you should be doing too. Let me show you what I did. I came out too far. Right here. I came out too far. And it closed down too much. I need to get more roundness in there. See how that's higher? Didn't come up high enough. Roll that. So I'm still sitting here trying to correct this, and I don't want y'all copying it. Y'all look at this. This is right. It comes just forward of that line. You have all the references you need here. So that gets me going. I actually drew this too deep. I can tell it already, but I got to roll with it here. We're out of time. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to start to darken some of these lines, cut right through where that was. Start to hit that harder. I'm going to come in here and hit this harder. Come in here and hit this harder. I'm starting to hit my atom bomb here a lot harder here just to start to firm up some of these fuzzies that have that I've lost. And right here where I know I've got a hard line, I'm going to go ahead and hit that with this straight edge. That's a no-brainer. Go ahead and nail that one with the straight edge and that one with the straight edge. Make sure that that's straight. And then roll around and hit that. Now when I get to starting to do my occluding contours here back on the back side, making sure this is all kind of working. When I get to this portion where I want to do the fluting, the fluting is kind of like the keyboard on the Macintosh. You don't want to overdo it. So I tend to do it out on the edges a little extreme like this. I just put a little jagged out there to show that back edge is going to have some fluting. That's actually where you're going to see it the most, is on the occluding contours. Right there and right here is where you're going to actually see that fluting the most. So I'm going to accentuate it right up here and hit that hard, because that actually informs what's going on. However many lines I do or don't draw that fluting out here, it's those two little things are going to inform someone looking at it. I hate doing the fluting, drawing it, because it's so many parallel lines to hit. Before I do that, I'm going to go on in and put the Electrolux window in, which is a signature thing of this. It's essentially centered on the handle, but at this point, the best thing is just to center it on the fluting lengthwise here and get a sense of how wide it is. It's fairly long. It takes up a big portion of this. I'm going to start it right here. Remember, vertical line. I'm going to end it right here, vertical line. It takes up most of the width of that fluting, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to my straight edge here and use straight edge line right there. That helps me hit it just almost perfectly. I'm going to come in, I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. That hits almost perfectly there. So I end up with my window. The window is more important than anything else. I mean, the fact that there is, in fact, a window here is more important than putting the letters in. I'm going to put the letters in, but you don't have to if you don't want to. And I don't have to say it exactly. What I'm doing with letters is looking at them as blocks, not as letters. So Electrolux, make sure I do have the right number in here. Lux. And so you kind of get something. It doesn't need to say Electrolux. It can be an abstracted kind of look to what that mark is. And it's going to have a little more definition up here closer than it does further away. So I'm going to put the L a little bit harder so you see that. See that second E a little bit kind of. And the C's got a little roundness to it. And maybe that's enough. You know, I don't think I've got to go much more than that. That shows me there is a mark in there. Put a little depth in there in the back of that window to kind of show that there's depth. I didn't do that well on the bottom. Okay, that's enough. Don't have to do the whole logo. I do want to do the flutes though, and I got to do just enough of them that shows that it's fluted. Golly, this is tough. It's like you want to do them fairly light. You know they don't come beyond that radius. They're all going to converge a little bit, so you're kind of, I am using the straight edge a little bit here. I'm not doing each flute. I'm kind of doing a few of them and trying to maintain as best I can that convergence. Not easy. Not easy. I just say it. It's not. But break them a little bit, you know, make them kind of not necessarily go the full length. Some may not. The flutes that are up here, you're going to have to do as a radius, you know, they kind of turn. So again, I prefer not to do all of them just because, but they follow exactly what's going on this front right here. So do your best. It's hard. This part's hard. That's why I save it for the end, and I'm kind of like, I'm not really hitting it that well either. But these are following that curvature. They round around, they roll just like that first ellipse you did. I'm going to quickly add the front handle, which I didn't really put in earlier. It really follows just a thickness on either side of that center line that I drew and kind of kicks back up. Has a little kickback. I'll put that, kind of make that break over that line. That gives it a little depth. And put some thickness in there. Technically, there's another little set of ribs up high right here. You ought to be looking at your drawing now and the Electrolux itself for the last bit of this drawing. It's really ought to be more about that than whatever I've got drawn. If you're looking at my drawing 90% of the time now, you're off base. Now I'm going to go in here and darken this ellipse line that I have here, because this is the pretty prominent looking line. I had drawn it way back. I think I hit it pretty close. It's got some concentrics in there. Bless you.
Thank you, sorry.
And it's darken the lines time, folks. I'm just going to come in here and now hit my hard lines, the ones I've been holding off on. Remember, ground line's a little bit thicker. That underneath line that I know is going all the way back, yeah, shoot you, I'm going to use a straight edge for that. Get that one tightened down a lot more. What am I missing here? What did I leave off? There's something I've left off. Kind of mucked up that handle there. Add a little shading there. Put a little shade and shadow in the window here. Sometimes that helps kind of make it look shadow boxed a little bit. Hit that line harder. Hit this line a little harder. You know, one thing that's a nice touch right here too is where that material break rolled around on that chrome piece. It actually steps back out, because that break follows this shape, and it allows you to, if you do a vertical or a horizontal right here on that, it allows you to kind of show where that break is on the fluting, and then it steps back up underneath here. There's actually also, I think, a ribbed offset that flows out of that I didn't really draw, but rolls around. Kind of adds a detail in there. Go ahead and darken this handle a little bit. It didn't come out quite what I wanted, so I'm gonna sometimes push the shading. There is an ellipse, actually a button way back there on that back. Kind of hides, but I'm gonna push that a little darker just so that it shows up. And haven't really shaded much on here. I could do that. Kind of needs it especially underneath here, because this is a rolling cylinder. You kind of expect it to have some shade underneath. I think that's what I'm feeling like. It almost needs to have some shade and shadow on that underneath part. So I'm going to shade this a little more than I normally would. I'm going to hit a little bit darker lines, light shading. This is the advantage of your pencil getting dull at the end, as you can kind of do this. This is the biggest mistake I made, was extending this too far. So that's a mistake, just got to live with that. What else? Is that it? No? What else? On the back. Yeah, the particular view I have, I won't see that because it's kind of stepped in so much. Yeah, good point. But your view might have it. So if you're looking at this from a little bit more from the side view than I am, you might actually see those step ups. I'll tell you, I'll draw them lightly. I would have one here, and then that's going to get offset rearward about an inch, and another one behind that. So you see, they're all going to tuck in behind on mine. But depending on your viewpoint, you might have to draw those in. That's true. So, yeah, if you got them in there, go on and add them. Here's kind of I don't know. I actually think the side view is still the best to look at for those because it shows them, kind of shows them that way. You can see the side of it. I tend to want to hit this darker under here. It's just a cylindrical type shape and we expect it to get shaded darker. So hit a few darker lines. Gotta really be careful with shading though. It's so easy to overdo. You don't want to hit it too hard. Maybe this line might be a little darker here. What time are we? 12:01. It is time.
You sassy fella.
This is FRE 18. Electrolux Model 30 vacuum cleaner from 1938.